Hello and welcome to the question and answer session about CLIR's Digitizing Hidden Collections, Amplifying Unheard Voices program, generously supported by the Mellon Foundation. I'm Louisa Kwasigroch, Managing Director at CLIR. Today we are here to answer your questions about the open call for initial applications for the program's fourth cycle. This is going to be a relatively informal session, so we don't have a long presentation. However, we want to share just a few slides to help you navigate this platform, get to know our team, and understand where to find important information. If you haven't yet, we'd love for you to introduce yourself in the chat, tell us who you are and where in the world you live. Remember to change the chat box setting from hosts and panelists to everyone.
To start off, here are some notes about how you can use Zoom during this session. A live transcript is being generated. To turn on this feature, click the CC Show Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. However, you're welcome to use chat for general introductions and conversation. If a chat box isn't already displaying on your screen, you can hover your mouse towards the bottom of the Zoom window and open it manually. To send a message to everyone, remember to change the default from hosts and panelists to everyone. We ask that you use the separate Q&A box to ask questions today. This box can be opened the same way as the chat box. You can upvote questions if they're similar to your own, or let us know that it would be helpful to you to have them answered live. If we don't have time to get to all the questions, we'll compare responses to those remaining ones, compose responses to the remaining ones, and post all the answers along with the session transcript. The session recording, Q&A document, and transcript will be available on our website's Apply for an Award page by the end of next week. CLIR's work is accomplished by a relatively small staff of about 20 geographically distributed individuals. Today's webinar is hosted by the CLIR's grants team, which administers CLIR's active regranting programs, offering support for the entire grant cycle from application to final report. The DHC AUV team is comprised of Sharon Burney, Program Officer from Midlothian, Virginia, myself, Alyson Pope, Program Officer from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Jane Larson, Senior Program Associate, also based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Lizzi Albert, our Community Relations Manager, who's based in Washington, D.C. And Louisa Kwasigroch, our Managing Director, based in Chicago, Illinois.
As you consider applying to our program, the most essential resource for you is the application guidelines. Combining instructions and insights into the program and its application process, the guidelines also allow you to draft responses to questions before adding them to our online grant application platform. A view-only Google Doc is linked to the Apply for an Award program page. Users without a Google account can access this version and download the document in whatever file format they wish using the File menu. For those with a Google account, we've also included a link to create an editable copy of the document automatically. Slide, please. At our August 27th applicant webinar, we received about 30 questions and made sure to capture and answer all of them in writing. These are all organized by topic, and you may find some of the answers to your questions there. We'll put the link in the chat, and we'll be doing something similar for today's session.
In the weeks since we first shared the application guidelines, some questions have come up on a regular basis. We're going to start by addressing a few of these questions, as well as things that were asked via the registration form, and then dive into the Q&A for today's session. So first, are small organizations eligible for this grant? How do we know if we're eligible? To be eligible to apply, an organization must be located in the United States or Canada and fall within at least one of the nonprofit categories we list on our website. If you have any questions about the eligibility of your specific organization, emailing us is the best way to be sure you're eligible. There are no restrictions on the size of an organization, and in fact, past cycles, reviewers have been very interested in funding smaller organizations to grow capacity. A review rubric includes a specific question about need, correlating to the question on the application. Why do you need support from CLIR's program to undertake this project? We thought a lot about equity during this program's design, and we hope this will help reviewers make decisions with these considerations. Do the collections we want to digitize need to be about communities or populations in the US, Canada, or North America? So no, the materials nominated for digitization must be owned and held by eligible organizations in the US and Canada, but there's no specific focus on collections relating to the US or Canada. The program has funded projects that focus on historic maps from Japan and manuscripts going back to the 1700s in the Muslim world, and archaeological research in Honduras. So a really wide variety of projects that disseminate rare and unique content about populations around the world. The requirements go back to our eligibility guidelines. As long as the collections are owned and held by an eligible organization in the US or Canada and fall within the thematic focus, they can be nominated for this program. Are fiscally sponsored organizations eligible to apply? If your organization does not meet the program's eligibility requirements because it does not have an IRS designation or is not a governmental or tribal unit whose purpose and normal function is collecting, preserving, and sharing rare and unique materials with the general public, then your organization is not eligible to apply under a fiscal sponsor. A fiscal sponsor may be added as a collaborator, but every organization has to meet the eligibility requirements, whether they're the lead applicant or a collaborator. Do you require a detailed description of existing physical objects or collections to already be in place or done? No, the minimum level of description is no minimum level of description is required. However, our reviewers will expect a fair level of knowledge of the size, scope, and condition of the collections so that you're able to present a compelling and competitive application to the program. If invited to submit a final application, there'll be space for you to share a completed description if it's available. In the past, this has included links to library catalogs or other content management systems, finding aids, and inventories. Such materials help reviewers see the depth and breadth of the materials and have a better understanding of the work that has already been accomplished. Can we use grant funds to create materials like oral histories? So no, the focus of this program is digitizing rare and unique content from existing physical collections, not the creation of new collections, original research, or intellectual works. Therefore, activities such as collecting new oral histories would be outside the scope of this grant. Digitizing already existing oral histories on physical media, such as magnetic tape, would be allowable, so long as the recordings are not born digital. What pre-digitization costs can be requested? Costs relating to preparing materials for digitization are allowable, like stabilization of materials condition, packing and shipping them to send to a digitization vendor, or initial metadata creation. But costs related to deciding what to include or not include would not be allowable. Applicants need to know what materials are going to digitize before completing an application. Grant funds may not be used for any activities undertaken prior to the project's start date. Can we request funding for creating programming about the digitizing materials? Occasionally, past recipients have requested and received amounts for funding for outreach related to the newly digitized collections, such as building a collection guide for students. But any programming request should not be an outsized percentage of the ask and should be directly related to connecting the newly digitized materials with potential user communities. Conducting a research project based upon data in the collection would be outside the scope of this program. And then finally, when are applicants notified whether they'll be invited to submit a full proposal? We'll share the dates again on our next slide, but you'll be notified whether you're invited to submit a full proposal by mid-February 2026. And then those who do advance will have until May 5th, 2026 to prepare that for submission.
So initial applications must be submitted online by midnight Eastern Time, October 20th, 2025. We anticipate that all organizations that submit an initial application will be notified if they are invited to submit a final application by mid-February 2026. We will provide additional support to those organizations invited to the final round to help develop your initial applications into competitive final apps. And we anticipate notifying applicants of award notifications in August 2026 and making the public announcement of funded projects in either late October or early November 2026.
Now it's time to turn to your questions. We'll do our best to get through as many as we can and may provide some typed answers if team members have the capacity during this session. Any unanswered questions will be answered in our transcript and shared to our website along with the recording. Alyson, you want to take the first one?
Sure. The museum is looking at having an on-site archive server in addition to the larger organization's IT department, keeping active backups on its own infrastructure. The vendor quote is significantly over the $15,000 allowed in the equipment budget line. Is this something that could be included in other costs as server time, or would it be considered a shared cost for the museum? This is probably a shared cost for the museum. We mean in terms of other costs, it's when you're like using an outside vendor, and they're using some type of digital delivery system or storage system, or you're paying like the ongoing platform costs just for the length of the grant. But for some kind of like physical piece of architecture, like a server, that would fall under equipment and supplies only. And so anything above the $15,000 would be a cost share that the museum would be responsible for.
Can we use this funding to develop a website for the digitized collection as a way to make it accessible? What restrictions would be on that use, and in what category in the budget narrative would it go? Yes, you can. I would put that under services and contractors. If it's over $5,000, you'll need a quote or a letter of offer from that contractor. So I would put it under services.
Is the digitization of indigenous art collections and other cultural objects allowable? It's an allowable format. If you mean like culturally allowable, that would depend on who owns and holds the materials. And that would need to be explained through your proposal. But those formats are appropriate and the focus of them sounds appropriate for the program.
Can CLIR funds be used to match IMLS funds for digitizing our archive? This is one I'm going to ask for more information about your project in an email to our CLIR, Digitizing Hidden Collections at clir.org. However, based on the limited information I have here, you would want to make it clear in your project proposal that the nominated materials are not being digitized elsewhere. So what percentage of this collection is being proposed for this project? Secondly, your cost share. Yeah, and that none of your budget, anything that you include in the budget is not being covered elsewhere. And as a reminder, I also want to say that this is a re-granting program from the Mellon Foundation. So it's not a federal grant anyway.
Do we get to choose the technical specifications for the digitization, e.g. file types or such, or does CLIR have specific technical guidelines? So we have some technical recommendations, and that document is linked in our application guidelines, I believe. But they're not prescriptive. They're just kind of to help folks that maybe are not familiar get a sense of what's like currently appropriate. But primarily, this comes down to our review panel. Our review panel is a mix of IP review, subject specialists, and technical specialists. The technical specialists are folks that do this work in the field. So they make a judgment on whether the technical specs you're planning for are appropriate for the project that you've laid out, and we generally follow their guidance there. So we want to see like current and appropriate specs, but we don't prescribe what that is because there's such a broad range of formats allowed in this program.
Do different entities within the same university need to be listed as separate collaborators? Typically, no. So sometimes we'll have like a department within the university and then maybe the library say at the same university. No, you wouldn't list them as separate collaborators unless they had different EIN numbers. Sometimes we will see this with universities that have separate campuses. So it might be the University of California, Santa Barbara, University of California, Los Angeles, or sometimes the dental school, like the medical school has a different campus location. Then you would do that. But typically, no, you do not have to list them as a separate collaborator.
Um, I think this is actually only one question. It says two questions, but if you have 1,000 documents and want to request to digitize 200, do you have to provide the specific 200 documents you digitize as long as we don't spend any of the grant on the selection and can describe what we want to digitize? That could be appropriate if you're stating deliverable quantities and you can appropriately describe what you're going to be digitizing without having made those selections ahead of time, but in all likelihood, you want to do part of that process ahead. But as long as you are not spending the grant on the selection and can name what you are doing in a way that the review panel can understand, we don't dictate that you have chosen to the item level exactly what you're going to digitize.
Then they say, can we use the funding to not only digitize, but to create an AR augmented reality digitalized representation of the content so that can be accessed using a phone on site as part of the tour? For example, photographs showing what place looked like can be overlaid over the physical place, or the contents of the letter can be recorded and played uh, at the place. So the primary focus of this grant is the digitization of materials that have not been previously digitized. And typically for the budget, we have this 50-50 rule where at least 50% of the budget should be focused primarily on digitization. And then the rest of your budget can be focused on other things. You're gonna have to make a great argument for that. It sounds like that would be relatively expensive and that the focus would be more on the augmented reality. I mean, we're not saying you can't, you just have to make that case in your project and in your budget narrative.
We have lots of elder talks, wisdom, oral history tapes we'd like to organize and digitize to share the knowledge with the broader community. Can funds be used for this? Those would be of appropriate format. And can funds be used to house the then digitized old tapes? So there's not a ton of space in the grant for preservation, but there is room for rehousing supplies, if that's what you mean for can funds be used to house the then digitized old tapes. You wouldn't be able to pay for like some kind of ongoing storage facility or cost, but if you're talking about like rehousing or related supplies like that, yes, those would be allowable within the budget restrictions and the materials would be allowable within the program restrictions.
Applying on behalf of a federally recognized tribe, we have been informed by our county department that any private grant funds we are awarded cannot be delivered by electronic transfer due to internal policies. If we are awarded a DHC grant, would it be possible to request that the grant funds be delivered via paper check? So we typically distribute our funds via bill.com and require people to register with them. That would be something that if that happened, if you're awarded grant funds, that would have to be a conversation between the organization, our legal team, and our chief financial officer.
I believe that Bill.com will issue a check.
Okay, thank you, Lizzie. So that's a yes.
Excuse me. Mountain Messenger newspaper publisher has written an MOU for Historical Society to have the 150-year-old broadsheets for the digitization project and store as many of them as needed in the messenger offices until they can provide suitable storage otherwise. Do you think that MOU is appropriate documentation for the grant application? I mean, as described, not having read it, this sounds like what you would upload as your additional documentation under our rights, ethics, and reuse section. We have a additional upload space there to upload these types of documents, MOUs, deeds of gift, etc., to prove that you have the rights to embark on the proposal. And where we have questions, that goes to our IP review team if it's not clear to us internally.
Can we use funding for maintaining a digital repository for completed oral histories related to the digitized collections? I'm not sure I'm understanding. Is this the materials that will be nominated for digitization? If it's the one that, if it's the materials, the oral histories are the materials that are being nominated for oral histories for this project, then yes, you can, as long as it's during, the fees are during the grant period. Anything outside of the grant period would have to be maintained by your organization. And let me just say this too, that all of your costs for this are going to be related to the nominated materials that you propose for digitization. Anything outside of that would be a cost share that you would have to pay.
Is it okay for a nonprofit to own a portion of the full collection if it is only that portion that is being digitized for this specific grant? Yes. More broadly, if there are materials that you don't own and you're not digitizing them, you do not have to tell us about them.
We receive funding from Mellon. Are we able to apply for the CLIR funds? Yes, you are.
In the guidelines, the oral history question was elaborated a little. It says that CLIR won't provide funding for oral history interviews except when essential to provide contextual metadata for digitized collections. Can you help clarify that caveat? We plan to record the owners of the collection describing the materials and then preserve those recordings and make them publicly accessible. What you are describing is probably allowable within the scope of the program and is specifically what we have basically funded in the past. When looking at collections around, say, tribal communities where you have a limited advisory group of elders familiar with old materials, and you are at risk at losing that knowledge because of the age of those participants, then in that case, the interview process is more of a metadata process than we are creating a new oral history collection. We see very many applications that are really aiming to create new oral history collections, and that is not what the program is for. But if the core of your project is digitization, and this is a supplemental activity needed to contextualize appropriately the materials you're digitizing, then it can be allowable.
What are thoughts about a Canadian org using a New York-based vendor for digitizing and hosting an online collection? I don't see any problems with that. The digitization vendors are going to be very specific to your materials, your organization, the condition that they're in is a very personalized project decision, and there's no issues with that.
I wanted to see clarification about funding metadata creation for pieces of the collection that have already been digitized through a different grant, but descriptions took longer to do than originally thought. We were able to fund digitization of a chunk of our collection, but it would be beneficial to have the remaining 300 cataloged with the remaining mini DVs to be digitized. Does this fall out of scope as a previous project or can it be tied in? I would recommend that you email us around this because I'm not completely sure that I am processing this question appropriately. But if they're already digitized and they're a large chunk of the materials, I don't think that the metadata related to them would be applicable. But that's why I need more information. So if you can email us at hiddencollections@clir.org, please.
Do we need to choose between applying for DHC and applying for recordings? There is. No, you can have both, but the PIs need to be different.
So this is a similar question. Can funding be used to support the production, including associated expenses like travel, lodging, etc., of digitized interviews of individuals connected to the subject material that we intend to digitize? These interviews would provide context that would then be aggregated into publicly available archival platform. Again, you're going to need to strike the balance between is this metadata work that is providing context for what you're digitizing, or are you creating separate works? And when you're looking at associated expenses like travel, lodging to conduct digital interviews, I'm concerned about the balance of your funding request because we do want to see digitization be the primary focus of these awards, and this kind of secondary metadata component shouldn't kind of be outsized in the financial ask.
Do we have to specify just one particular collection, or can we include multiple collections that can be digitized through this project? You can use multiple collections. We see that happen frequently. Your project must tell a cohesive story of those collections, though, that also hit upon our 5 core values. So yes, we see people use multiple collections, especially for collaborative projects. There may be collections across organizations that are connected and have a connective story that bounds them together and talks about the scholarly and community and national, transnational context of the subjects of those stories. So that's on you to build this connection between them. Any more questions?
Can the digitization be done in-house? Yes. There is no requirement for this program, unlike Recordings at Risk, that you use a vendor. You can do the digitization in-house. You can hire staff for the project term to do the digitization. You can use an outside vendor. You can use a combination of any of those if you have multiple formats and you need specific expertise to get specific formats done. None of that is dictated. It can all be decided based on what your project needs are.
Let's see. I'm just going to start reading some out the Q&A box. Would a Canadian nonprofit who does not have charitable status be eligible to apply? Yeah, you just email us and we can email the inbox at hiddencollections@clir.org and we can double check and make sure your exact organization does qualify, but it sounds like you do.
Other than the primary costs of reformatting, can costs include vendor outsourced non-English language cataloging and metadata? What about the rights review for potential to publish? We do not pay for rights reviews or copyright consultation. You can do translation, transcription, non-English language cataloging, and metadata. You can either do that through a vendor or in-house, or if you need a translator, you can hire a contractor. But those would be allowable except for the rights review.
Our proposal would consist of the documentation of wall murals interior to a maximum security prison. The collection would consist of artworks across multiple yards. I am wondering if this stretches the definition of collections beyond the frame of the grants. What kind of how are you what are you calling the documentation? Are these artworks original artworks? Are these digital reproductions of the artworks? Because then they're already digitized and they wouldn't qualify.
We've done murals.
We've done murals before, so
If you
go ahead. Were you saying something?
If this prison is one entity, or like I think it depends on who is trying to do this digitization, like if it's like a historical nonprofit, or we would need more information about like the eligibility of the entity, but I don't necessarily think that stretches the parameter of a collection,
Yeah,
if you can make the argument.
yeah, I think that well, one, email us so we know what organization this is, and also think about really have some emphasis on the rights, ethics, and reuse of that. But yeah, email us because that's a little vague.
Because we have done like kind of incarceration projects and institutionalized like state institution projects across multiple sites.
Yes.
Do collaborators have to nominate collections to be digitized as well as the lead institution? I don't exactly know what this question means. I think you mean do you have to hold materials to be a collaborator? And no. In some cases, collaborators are appropriate community organizations that lead institutions are partnering with for consultation or outreach around the collections, not necessarily to digitize their materials. But if you are digitizing someone else's materials, they must be a collaborator. I hope that makes a clear distinction.
Because you can have community partners that aren't necessarily listed as official collaborating organizations. We would like to know if our nonprofit organization owns the materials to be digitized in the archiving process is one of our main programs with the original filmmaker as part of that program. She's an elder in the community, so time is crucial, but her original organization is not a nonprofit. Would we still be eligible?
I think you should email us because I'm not clear.
Yeah, email us because it's hard for us to determine when we don't know the organization and what's going on.
If they were privately created, but they have been gifted to a nonprofit,
Then you would put that.
then they would be
If-
eligible.
You'd be eligible, you would just upload maybe the gift of deed and your others.
But like yeah, I think we might need a little bit more
Yeah.
to make sure that we're understanding that question properly.
We are a university. Can we hire graduate assistants who specialize in digitization to do the work? Absolutely. And make sure when you do that, you're offering them an equitable pay wage to do such, that reviewers kind of look at that kind of very, it's one of the higher credentials, that criteria that they put on that.
Can collaborators be added to the full application if invited to complete one? For example, if conversations about our partner organization's role progress over the next few months and formal collaboration on the project makes more sense. Yeah, we do see changes in the proposals that are invited back for the final application round. There's not a requirement that you have the exact same proposal both rounds. In fact, like part of the process of the support series is to help you identify places where you may need to make changes. So yeah, if you are in the process of solidifying a relationship with a collaborator and that relationship comes together between apps, you can certainly add someone, and to the same token, if something falls apart, you can take someone out.
Is this a limited submission opportunity? No, it is not. However, when you get to the final proposal, if we have more than one application from the same organization, we will ask, and if you are nominated for funding to the final round, we'll usually ask the organization to pick the one. And remember, you can't list the same PIs on both. You can't be a PI on two funded projects at the same time.
If the undigitized collection is located in the National Archives in Washington, D.C., do you require that the applicant have official approval from NARA, or is it sufficient to articulate the current policies on public access for research and usage restrictions? I will say historically that we have not required official approval from NARA. We've also had projects that have used like Library of Congress materials, and we have not required official approval in those instances either. It is possible that some of our protocols around federal materials may change if we see consistent hurdles to access arising. But at this time, we do not make that a requirement.
You mentioned there is a rough 50-50 rule that at least 50% of the grant budget should cover the actual digitization work. Would that 50% include the cost for metadata, cataloging, and any staff costs for the above? We're trying to incorporate some programming and outreach to raise awareness of the collection in the community, but still want to strike the right balance in the budget to make sure it's still digitization focused. Yeah, we would consider staffing, metadata, cataloging, and all of that to be a part of the digitization process. Sustaining and preparing your materials for digitization is part of the digitization process as far as the reviewers are concerned. So that's the right balance. It looks like you're focused on the right balance.
Do you look for a certain number of collaborators? First of all, we don't look for anything. We use an outside independent review panel, and they're the folks that make the decisions in this program. And they don't necessarily look for collaborators, period, or a specific number of collaborators. The project and program looks to uphold authentic partnerships, but that doesn't only mean collaborations, and it doesn't necessarily mean that a collaboration is appropriate for your project. We have had more single organization projects funded than collaborative projects funded. I think the largest collaborative project we've had was like close to 20 organizations. And let me tell you, it's a bear to administrate. But we don't have there is no
No.
competitive preference.
Yeah.
for collaboration versus not.
Yeah, the advice that we'll give you are advice based on our experience of what we see the reviewers asking for in applications and best practices to submit a competitive application.
And I'm also just going to make an example because people sometimes don't understand what this means. Like, if you are an organization digitizing a bunch of materials related to a tribal entity that you are not a part of, perhaps you would put together a community advisory board and pay those members honorariums to help you make appropriate decisions about the access level for the materials you're digitizing. So those folks would not necessarily need to be collaborators, but in working with them, you're still demonstrating authentic partnership. So sometimes people kind of conflate those two things. So just to speak to the program core value does not mean that you must build a collaborative project.
Right. What is the overall funding pot? How many organizations do you plan to fund? So we have, what do we have, 4? How much do we have to give away, Louisa?
Yes, we have $4 million.
$4 million to give away. We'd love to fund everybody, but we can't, and we don't make the decision. The independent review panel does, but we usually typically fund about 15 to 20 projects a year.
Yeah, that sounds right with our current with the cap at 300,000.
Yeah. And it's always contingent upon many things, how many final applications we get and people complete, what the asking of the price is for if all of the applications ask for 300,000, then we fund less. If we have a nice mixture of asks between the 50 to 300,000, we can usually fund more.
Is it important for any digitized files to be publicly available online in order for the project to be competitive? Not necessarily. There is a requirement that the metadata is shared. Um, we look for appropriate access levels for the materials, for the community that they relate to. So you may have materials that are heavy in PII, like personal identifiable information. You might have stuff related to HIPAA, stuff where you're dealing with sensitive subjects for folks that are still living. And there's plenty of reasons why you would pursue a restricted access model. And as long as that is explained in your application, the panel would rather see that be appropriate and sensitive than see you planning to share materials that you really should be being more cautious about.
Yeah. So as part of the 5 core values, public knowledge, broad representation, authentic partnerships, sustainable infrastructure, and community-centered access. Also looks like outreach. It's not just advocating for approaches to access, that description, but it's also outreach that makes the content widely available for the public.
This is an important question. To what extent would letters of support help with this first stage of the application? Letters of support are not included in the initial application. They are only included in the final application. And sometimes people get confused about that. So they upload letters of support as their additional documents. And if you upload a letter of support as your additional document, we are going to take it out of your application and the panel will never see it.
Also,
So hold on to those letters until you get invited to the final round.
and adhere to the page numbers, because if you go over the page numbers, for any uploads, then that too will be taken out and they'll never see anything past that page.
I know that was confusing last year because we changed some things around a little bit, so sorry about that, folks. Sorry for not being clear. How is our review panel selected? We kind of have had a rolling group since the inception of AUV. So this is our fourth cycle. We have a mix of subject specialists, technical specialists, folks that are kind of both, and IP reviewers. We also sometimes have a form up on our website when we have openings in the panel for folks to express their interest in being a reviewer. Right now we have a little bit of a backbench, but we always have a few folks that come off every year. We do look for specific profiles of expertise typically to make sure that we're like well-rounded. You can also see these folks on our program website. They are, I'm not sure if our panel for this round is up, but our panel from last round will be up, and we always put people's names and headshots up there so you can see who everybody is.
Is storytelling important for the application? I would say yes. I would suggest telling a very compelling story about the collections, the nominated materials, and why why digitizing them and making them accessible to the public will impact the broader local, national, and transnational context of scholarly research. The reviewers, you want to pull the reviewers in and you want them to be excited about, yes, this is important and this is why this needs to be digitized.
Does CLIR co-house the digitized collections as backup and or support public dissemination? No, we do not co-house the digitized collections. We don't hold, we don't function as a personal, well, not a personal, we don't function as an institutional repository for these projects. Currently, we list them on the funded projects pages, but we don't house them.
That's why one of the 5 core values is sustainable infrastructure. So we want the collections to promote forward-thinking strategies for the long-term availability, discoverability, and interconnection of the digitized content. These are great questions.
Do you balance funding allocations between Canada and the US equally? No. We do not necessarily. It's the easiest. We do look at geographic distribution as part of the award process. Because the program expanded to Canada more recently, we typically do not see equal representation in the applicant pool. There are usually a much higher number of US applicants. So I think the Canadian applicants are arguably more competitive because they stand out, but we don't award equally because there's nowhere near an equal representation in the applications we're seeing.
In your answer about storytelling in local, national, transnational context, are you saying that scholarly entries are prioritized? Yes and no. So what we're saying is we want nominated materials that fall under the underheard voices and collections, but we want things that deepen the public understanding of human history and these stories that have not been told. So isn't just academic scholarly identities, it's communities. So why is this collection important to the telling of history? Why is this collection important to humanities centered focuses?
Folks also tend to have some folks with hyper local collections tend to have a hyper local conception of their impact. That's not actually accurate. There are numerous ways in which they have broader impact. Um, and sometimes that's either not obvious to folks because their context is so local, or it is so obvious to them that they are not speaking to it in the proposal. They just think it's a given. So I think when we emphasize that broader impact, that's really the piece that we're trying to point to. If you have a hyperlocal collection, that doesn't mean it's not eligible or appropriate. It just means you have to tell the impact story of those broader connections. They don't necessarily need to be only scholarly in interest.
Right. Would you be open to reviewing a project summary in advance of submitting? No, we can't do that.
No, we can't do that. Sorry.
Sorry.
We can answer your questions if you want to send them to the program box. We will always do our best to answer specific questions, but we cannot offer direct feedback on text that you want to put into the application.
But yeah, please send us any detailed questions that you may have.
Do you have any preference for PIs that are university-based, or do you have recommendations for community-based archives that are not based at an academic institution? We are always looking for a range of applicant types. We want community-based archives to apply. We want historical societies to apply. We want volunteer-run organizations to apply. We want universities to apply. We want the gamut. And we like to see a range. So there is not necessarily a preference or any kind of we're not trying to
The academic organization.
yeah, push you to only look to academic organizations as partners or the like. We have funded community-based archives and independent organizations basically every round of this iteration, and I would be surprised if we do not continue to do so.
Yeah, I think for their project specific, what's important for your project and what fits for your project. If you have oral history or historical societies, public libraries, community archives, all kind of organizations. Can our budget include the cost of storage, storing digital materials through cloud, for example? You can include, yes, you can include cloud storage in your budget.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to put the final slide up. Oh,
Oh,
will cloud storage costs beyond the scope of the project be permitted? No, you can only pay for server storage for the term of the grant. You can purchase like physical storage software. That is a one-time cost that you can purchase.
and all expenses have to be expended during the grant period only.
The collection which I want to use for my application is connected to an institution that is slated to close in July 2026 for about 2 years of renovations and construction as part of a master plan. Does not having a traditional on-the-ground space impact feasibility. I think this would be a matter of your access to the materials. As folks that ran this program through COVID, we have seen people be rather creative about doing digitization off-site or remote ways of doing different workflows. So I think you would probably want to address that in your application and explain what kind of ongoing access you would have and how that would work, but I don't think it would preclude you from being an applicant.
If we're doing in-house digitization and need a larger scanner for certain materials, would that kind of equipment be eligible? Yes, it would, as long as the cost is $15,000 or less.
How does the digitization of material currently located outside the US and Canada affect application? Can funding be used to transport material to the US for digitization? The material is required to be in the geographic range of eligibility. So you cannot use funding to get the material here. The expectation is that the materials are here already and that the work would take place here.
Do you require a match? No, we do not.
Okay, I'm putting up the closing slide.
If we're doing, like somebody, if we're doing in-house digitization, any larger scanner for certain materials, yes, we already answered that. Yes, you can, as long as it's $15,000 or less. We're going to put the answer to these questions, even the ones we weren't able to finish, on our Q&A document. Jane?
Yeah, so as we're wrapping up, we want to make a note of a super short survey about the session. Your honest feedback on the webinar will help us on our future support efforts. So we're going to share the link in the chat, and we'll also include it in a message after the event.
I'm going to take this last one because it's just sitting here and we have 2 minutes left. Can we explain the typical role of a collaborator? Usually multi-collaborator projects are projects that are about a theme. For instance, one that we had was the US periodicals in the borderland. So it's like Spanish language newspapers along the Mexican-American border. So there were multiple holding organizations that had these newspapers in their collections, and they joined together to digitize them. So every collaborator was a small collection holder to comprise a larger themed collection. That's most typically the role we see in collaborators. They have a portion of a collection and a organization is trying to build a larger proposal around a theme. I think we're done.
Thank you.